What's up, world? I'm just chilling on my porch, enjoying this beautiful day, summertime. Why not be outdoors, get some nature? It's a nice breeze coming through. So I'm gonna talk about Castle Hill a little bit more and my fourth and fifth grade year in elementary school. As I was saying, I left PS 119 because of the divorce that my mother had with my stepfather. And then I went back to PS 182 after they expelled me. So I'm back at PS 182, and the school was tough. I had this fourth grade teacher, Miss Palad. She was a nice teacher. She was very smart, but she was stern, very disciplined. If you ask me, she was more like a drill sergeant. She knew what I was capable of, and I believe that's why she was so hard on me. And as far as my classmates, you know, they were, kids, and you know what kids do? Kids bully each other. So around that time, you know, I was getting bullied by them, but I was bullying back. Everybody picked on each other. That's what it was. I think that's something that we did to help time pass by. And ironically, I believe I had the same teacher again for fifth grade. Yeah, Miss Palal looked nice. She did. I would say I had a huge crush on her, but she got married to some guy. I ain't care though. If she sees it, she can still reach out. I'm a single man. Yeah. So after I graduated elementary school, I went to Bronx Math. It was about 2 blocks down from PS 182. And this was the start of everything for me. So we left Stevenson Commons, and we're on Crows Ave, right about 43rd Precinct. And it's right by the Cable Vision, that used to be there. I'm pretty sure it's still there. And, my mother, she's with another man. And he was cool around this time. We didn't really know each other. But back to Bronx Math, that's the name of the school that I attended. And I have some stories for y'all. Yeah. So, sixth grade was cool. This is where I met everybody. I met a couple dudes from Castle Hill. We always used to play ball together. And I met some dudes from Soundview. And the big thing about Bronx Math, we always had brawls. It was brawls between Bronx Math and Archimedes, which was another school in IS 174. And even Bronx Math had brawls between each other. We used to fight. It was gladiator school. It was crazy back then. We would either fight in school or we'll wait until after school to fight. But it was never like, any, bad intentions. It was all love. We fought for the fun of it. Just to say that we fought. It wasn't no beef. But that was the thing that we did. But we took it serious as far as, we're going to do this every week kind of thing. Yeah. And this is where I had my first fight. I actually had 2 fights in Bronx Math. The The first dude I fought, his name is Jakeem, and we was in Mr. Ford's class. We was in math class. That was my favorite class because I'm a mathematician. That's what I do. I like numbers. I like money. I was always, you know, very skilled in mathematics. But back to the fight, you know, the bullying continued. Continued into middle school. But that's what we did. This is what we call it cutting ass. I don't know what other places call it. They call it jonesing on each other. Now we cut each other ass. We flamed each other. That's what we did in New York. So it got to a point where I reached my breaking point. Jakeem, he was ODing, doing the most. I'm like, all right, and I got serious, and I swung on him. I know I started the fight. That was the first time I started the fight, and we sitting there scuffling, and he got me on the floor. He was a little, he was a little stronger than me, around that time. So he got me on the floor, and he was, getting his couple hits on the floor. But I'm still swinging. We going back and forth, and I bruised him in his eye. He had a cookie right on his right eye, I believe. And his nickname was Lazy Eye, because he had a lazy eye. He was a funny looking dude. No disrespect, Yeah, we used to cut each other ass. You say, the word was ugly. The word is ugly, but we call each other Uggs. Like, yo, you Uggs. In Soundview, we use a terminology called Mo. That was like bro, in a way. Like the whole Soundview Castle area abused that word to the ground, ran into the ground. Like, yo, you Uggs, Mo. It's still in me, but I don't talk like that anymore. But yeah, we was just picking on each other, and we was in the principal's office, and we just looking at each other, staring each other down. And then after a while, we just started laughing. We let it go, and we started talking about other things, And he was a good friend. He was my best friend, actually. Yeah, in 6th grade, he was my best friend. I went to his crib. That's what I'm saying. After I fought him, we went to his crib, a couple days later, I believe, or a week later. We were just chopping it up, playing video games, writing Soundview projects. That's where he's from. So that's why I was in the P's. That's why I met David. I met him in Bronx Mad, but, I ran into David a lot out there. Ran into, Tyrone, Dupree, a lot of these Soundview dudes. You had the gardens right there. So I was real cool with Soundview. Like, that was my home for real. I wasn't raised in them P's, but I was in and out the motherfuckers like I lived there. They had a basketball court there called the Jungle. Shit, Jesse, that's where I met Jesse at. I called him on the court a couple times. He even came to Harden a couple times. Like, that's what we did when we was young. We played ball a lot. Keep our mind, occupied. Yeah. And, in 6th grade, that's when I was, like, really getting into girls. Yeah, like, that's when I started macking as far as, like, I'm going to approach you and spit my game and see where it goes. And I was successful, but I still wasn't there as far as, like, continuously, like, doing it. But that was the beginning. And then 7th grade, got a little more, serious. I'm starting to hang with girls. I believe that I got my first kiss from a girl named Shakima. I'm airing it out. It is what it is. I met her at PS 100. That's where we was hanging out at, and we was at a park, and that's where I had my first kiss. Yeah, she has a whole family now. Everybody got family. Everybody got kids. It's crazy, yo. Yeah, I had a major crush on her. Everybody liked her back then. Yeah, crazy, yo. And, going into 7th grade, the feud between Castle Hill and Soundview continue. That's what we did. And also, we always used to roast each other. We used to flame each other. And I ain't gonna lie, man. Y'all Castle Hill dude, y'all niggas is wild. You know, I ain't gonna take away street credibility and all that. Y'all get active. Every hood gets active. But y'all niggas was sweet. As far as y'all niggas like boys, and that's something I'm not into. But I'm not knocking it. If that's what you do, that's what you do. I'm not judging you. I'm not discriminating, but that's just something I wasn't really into. So I have a story where I was leaving detention, I believe. I was either 6th or 7th grade, and I was with a dude. He was cool. We chopped it up a lot of times, and chopping it up is having conversation for people who don't know the slang. So we were exiting the building, and he was a big dude. I'm not gonna describe him too much because I still respect him. So this nigga, kissed me when I wasn't looking. Like I was, looking the other way, and then he gave me a peck on the lips. I'm like, man, what the hell wrong with you? Yo, you tweaking, you bugging out, you wilding. And he just sitting there smiling, thinking it's funny. And I did want to punch him. I did. It was in my nature to be like, yo, I'm gonna break you down. But he was a big dude. He was like husky, and he was experienced fighting. So we would have been tussling for real. And then I gotta fight the dude every time I see him. He was fighting every day, basically. That was the kind of guy this guy was. And he didn't seem to be that way. He didn't look that way, But then he had a little twinkle in his eye. But, yeah, he did that. And, I just walked off, let it go. And then, I seen him again. And, he was cool. He basically played off like nothing happened. And I did the same thing because I feel like most boys around that time would be like, oh, nah, I'm going to air him out. I'm going to spread the business. I'm going to tell people what you did to me. Nah. I'm not going to humiliate him. That's not my kind of thing. I'm not going to spread rumors, even if they're true. Because he still never disrespected me, He always kept it, cool around me. But that let me know that I'm a very handsome person. I'm a beautiful being. So, I'm flattered, but no thank you. Yeah. And I also forgot to mention that my mother, she was a security guard for 9/11. I should have said that in the earlier chapters. But yeah, she was a security guard for 9/11. The World Trade Center. And she just happened to be off that day, which is crazy. I was born already around that time. But imagine losing your mother to a crisis like that. Just, it's ridiculous. Yeah, but I'm thankful that she's still here. And then also, my sister's father, his car was on fire when we were on the highway. And, police had to come, and, firefighters had to come, to mitigate the situation. So that was a crazy time too. And then this is the one that types it off. After we leave Crows Avenue on 43rd, we moved to Lafayette Avenue, right on the corner of Soundview. Like you walk a block up, and the crib is right there. We was living in a house this time. We was in the basement, and I'm on my way from school. I think this is 6th grade, and Jonathan, You know, he was one of my classmates at Bronx Math, and I get home and he's outside. He's like, "Yo, your house is on fire." I'm like, "What? What do you mean my house is on fire?" He's like, "Yeah. You know, you got paramedics, you got police, ambulance, firefighters, fire trucks." I'm like, "What's going on, yo?" He said, "Your house is on fire." And I called my mother and I let her know what was going on. She couldn't believe it. And from what I know, we were behind in rent, which was the case a lot of times. You know, living with my mom and whoever she's staying with, we will always be behind in rent. Now, I know times get hard. I understand that. Nobody's perfect. But I feel like that's the reason why the house was on fire. It's possible that the landlord could have done it intentionally so he can file insurance on it and then maybe, you know, revamp it and deck it out however and give it to somebody else. Because everything in there wasn't burnt. So it was like somebody deliberately burnt sections of the house, and I don't know, it just seemed kind of staged. Yeah, but that was crazy. Yeah. Yup. And then I'm gonna get back to, you know, them Castle Hill dudes. When we was in middle school, a lot of them said gay jokes and motherfuckers would reach for certain areas, private parts of your body, and I'm like, yo, I don't play that. Like, but the Soundview dudes is crazy. The Soundview dudes, they never played that. They were too stern and strict. They were too thorough. But Castle Hill dudes flip flop a lot. They do. And as far as, you know, flip flopping, they flip flop with the sexuality, they flip flop with the gangs. They were never, you know, in a steady situation. And I'm not saying all Castle Hill dudes, but there's just a lot of them, you know, a lot of them, you know, tend to flip, you know. Yeah. Once again, there's no disrespect. I learned a lot from everybody in my neighborhood. And everybody has a reason for what they do. You know, it's possible that these people could have been molested and, you know, touched as a child. And I know a lot of people have. They just don't, you know, express themselves and they don't tell their stories. I haven't been touched that way, and I'm appreciative of that. But there was one time where I decided to hop in the car of this middle-aged white man's car. I decided to hop in his car. He asked me if I needed a ride. I was working at Dunkin' Donuts. This is my first job. Well, my second job, actually. This is my second job. My first job was, you know, being a teen staff member at Kiss Bay. And my second job was Dunkin' Donuts. And I worked Dunkin' Donuts for the summer, too. Yeah, Kiss Bay after summer youth. And the next year, I worked at Dunkin' Donuts. So it was a hot day, and he offered me a ride. So I'm like, why not? F it. So I hopped in his car, and, you know, he took me back to my neighborhood. And then, you know, he asked me if, you know, if I wanted to do something with him. And I'm like, nah, I don't go that way. That's not my cup of tea. And this is no disrespect to people who indulge in those activities. That's who you are. But that's not who I am. And, you know, I told him, you know, if you try something, you know, I'm gonna punch you in your mouth. That's what I told him. And I hopped out the car. Yeah. You know. Yup. And then I remember one time too, you know, being in Soundview, I got affiliated, you know, with gang members. I'm not gonna say which group because I won't incriminate myself, but I got affiliated and I started to partake into a lot of things as far as fights, robberies, armed robberies, Like, it was getting deep for me. And I still maintain to go to school and, play it cool. And the reason why I joined these organizations was because my home wasn't steady. My mom, she was very aggressive towards me, and I get that because I'm a boy, I'm a man. She wants to raise me to, take care of myself. I understand that. And, she never had a reliable man by her side. And then my stepfather, he was really a piece of shit, and not my sister's fault. The man that my mother married afterwards, he was really, an asshole. I even got into a fight with him because he wanted me to do something right at that moment. And I told him, I'll get to it, as soon as I'm done doing what I'm doing. But no, he wanted it done right then. And then he decided to put his hands on me, and we sitting there tussling, And then he decided to go downstairs after he tussling, and he not even swinging on me. You see what I'm saying? He's scratching up my neck and shit. A lot of funny style stuff. And I'm like, okay. And he went downstairs, and he's like, man, come outside. I'm gonna handle you, this, that, and the third. And this dude is in his 30s. I'm like 13, 14 around this time. And see, this is what led me to, join an organization. It's not because I was afraid, but I was nervous. I'll lay my head at night. I'm like, damn, do I have to boom him? Do I have to get rid of dude? And then him and my mom was always, combative and arguing. And I know that happens in relationships, but sometimes it got physical, I'm like, damn. So I had to sleep with knives underneath my pillow. You know what I'm saying? Like big ass blades. That shit could have poked me up while I was sleeping. Like, for real. I'm just like, yo, I'm prepared. I'm prepared. That's where I was at. I had shotguns underneath my bed. That was the type of shit I was on, And then I had beef with Stevenson Commons. That's where I was raised at, but they flipped on me because they're a different gang. But that shouldn't matter, I always looked at them, as family, but they didn't look at me that way. And these guys, they play basketball, And then you had dudes that didn't play ball and they just wanted to be active in the street. They didn't know what to do with their time. So, they got gang affiliated. They was doing whatever they was doing. But yeah, I had beef with them for no reason. I ain't started nothing with them. But it all started over a female I was dealing with. I'm never gonna say her name. She's a nobody. But yeah, it started over a girl I was dealing with. And I'm like, I don't want you talking to her, so and so. And I didn't know he was from the Stevenson Commons. But he happened to be from there. So, he's like, oh yeah, we can handle this. I'll pull up. So, I pull up. And it's like 8, 9 o'clock at night. I'm with the dudes, that put me down. I got jumped in and all that good stuff. And, I fuck with, whoever fuck with me. I ain't care what color you was riding for, If you was family, you was family. So, it's a mixed breed in the whip. We all in this shit. So we ride to the spot and we got these dudes outside. And there's 50 of them. There's 40 or 50 guys outside for me. So that let me know the power that I have. They really wanted me to take, note of what was going on. And they really wanted to take me out of here, All of that was animosity. because they didn't have a reason to feel that way towards me. I didn't do anything. Like I said, I was a good kid, and I still never did nothing to them. Whatever situations I had in the street were completely private and separate from what I had with them. But yeah, they was all waiting outside, and we on FaceTime, and the kid that smacked me, he was there. So that lets me know he got wind of the situation, and he couldn't wait to see me. So I'm in the whip, and we talking, chit-chatting, and then he's like, oh, didn't I smack you? I'm like, man, look, do you know how old I was? I was like 6, 7 years old. So, and I was with my sister. Why would I let her see that? But he was determined that day. And once again, I always move solo. I'm a soldier that can handle his own. I don't need no fucking, camp around me. I don't need an entourage. I am the entourage. If you're moving in a pack, that means you're weak. I never seen these dudes alone. And then it was times where I did see them alone, certain ones, and they would run. I would try to chase them, but they run, They can't stand on them. And once again, I'm not talking about the whole neighborhood of Stevenson Commons. It was just a select group. The youngins around that time, they just had an issue with me. Yeah, but that was a fucked up situation for real. Yeah, so, I made it back alive. My homies made it back alive. And see, even the dudes I was riding with, they not my homies either. That's what I want you to understand too. Don't join anything. Stay independent. Create your own path. And whoever decides to step in alignment with you, allow them to a certain degree. And then you choose if you want them to be around or not. Yeah. Like I said, they call, this basketball court in Soundview projects the jungle. That's what the shit really was. It was a jungle. Yup. Yeah.